Hello, my YouTube family, and welcome back to Crime Whisper. I know many of you love listening to these stories as you drift off to sleep before we get started. Leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe now. Get comfortable, relax, and let's dive into tonight's chilling case story. 1. Our story takes us to the quiet village of Alfords Church in northeast Warwickshire, England. December 1996 had already been dominated by shocking news of a brutal road rage incident, leaving the local community stunned. Let's meet the people at the heart of the story. Lee Harvey, 25, worked as a bus driver. His mother, Moran, said all he wanted was to be a loving husband and a devoted father. Friends and family described Lee as cheeky, fun, and full of life. He had a young daughter, Danielle, whom he adored despite being separated from Danielle's mother. Lee maintained a supportive and friendly relationship with her. Tracy Andrews, 27, dreamed of becoming a model while working as a bartender. She met Lee in a club in 1994, and their connection was immediate and intense. Tracy had a daughter, Carla, just a year younger than Danielle. Her past relationships had been turbulent, and Tracy's possessive and volatile nature was well known to those around her. Lee himself could be jealous, and fights often erupted over small matters, despite the toxicity. Lee moved into Tracy's flat after 3 months, but the couple's arguments were frequent and fierce. Tracy would often kick Lee out, throwing his belongings into bin bags, only for him to return later. Maureen, Lee's mother, saw the warning signs early. She described Tracy as controlling, paranoid, and deeply insecure. Tracy confided that her difficult childhood, including her father leaving when she was 6, had left lasting scars as time passed. The relationship grew more dangerous and codependent. Arguments became the only predictable aspect of their lives. Neighbors often overheard shouting matches lasting hours, and police were called to their flat multiple times. Things took a brief turn when Tracy became pregnant. Everyone hoped the baby would bring stability, and Lee was overjoyed at the thought of a second child. Tragically, she later suffered a miscarriage after a fall. Despite this, Lee proposed, and the couple began planning their wedding one evening. After yet another explosive argument, Lee and Tracy went to the Marlbrook pub to try to calm down. Later, on their short drive back to their flat in Bexelve Church, their lives would change forever. Our car suddenly pulled up outside Lee's parents' home. Moran didn't think much of it, expecting Lee to come home soon and explain the latest fight, but he never arrived. Instead, police officers approached, delivering unimaginable news. Lee and Tracy had been involved in a terrifying road rage incident. Lee had been stabbed more than 40 times in a frenzied attack and did not survive. Tracy was rushed to Royal Alexandra Hospital, recovering from injuries sustained during the altercation. A witness staying in a nearby cottage saw Tracy standing beside Lee's car as he lay lifeless in the road. Drenched in blood, neighbors helped her call the police, but it was too late. Tracy later recounted to authorities that shortly after leaving the pub around 10 p.m., Lee had overtaken a dark-colored Ford Sierra. This sparked a dangerous chase down the narrow lane. The other car flashed its lights and tailgated them, eventually overtaking them. Lee and the driver confronted each other, leading to a violent struggle. Both Lee and Tracy were attacked, and during the fight, Lee was stabbed. The attackers fled, leaving Tracy to cradle him as he lay dying in her arms. Lee left Moran and Ray with unbearable questions. Why would someone stab their son to death, yet leave his fiancée alive, seemingly unharmed? And now a key witness. Why didn't she call us? Ray asked. Confusion and grief etched on his face. Moran and Ray were desperate for answers, and tried repeatedly to contact Tracy after she was discharged from the hospital. Finally, they reached her stepfather, who explained she hadn't called because she forgot their number to Moran and Ray. This sounded impossible. Tracy had called their home countless times before, especially after fights with Lee. Her avoidance raised more suspicion, and her story seemed to create more questions than answers despite her inconsistencies. Moran wanted to believe in Tracy. The police said she had been attacked too. She said how could she have been involved? She might not have been the woman I wanted Lee to end up with. But I was convinced she loved him on December 3rd, amid swirling rumors. Tracy participated in a press appeal, urging the public to help identify the two men involved. Holding Moran's hand, she recounted her version of events: the cat-and-mouse chase, the sudden confrontation, and the attack. The way he looked, his eyes, they just didn't seem normal. Tracy explained, I saw the man hit Lee. I don't know what he used. I fell to the floor. I can't remember if I was knocked out, but I tried to stop the bleeding and comfort him as much as I could. Tracy even appealed to the driver of the other car to come forward, assuring him he would not be in trouble. It's nothing to do with the driver. Whoever was with you ruined my life. Please, just tell us who he is, she said. However, Tracy's timeline conflicted with the police's account. When asked what time they left the pub, she wavered. About 10 to 10. I didn't really check my watch. Not 10 to 11. No, about 10 to 10. Detectives quickly stepped in to end the press conference, stating, we're perhaps getting into too much detail we don't want to go into right now. The media raised eyebrows. Why wasn't Tracy blaming the driver, who had allegedly initiated the altercation? Police were shocked, as the driver could have been considered an accessory or even a co-conspiratoriate. The press appeal produced leads. 2 witnesses reported seeing Lee's white Ford Escort that night, approaching the lane where he would be killed. But strangely, Lee's car suddenly braked and stopped. With no cars behind him, and no apparent reason, the witnesses continued on their way. Oblivious to what was about to unfold the next day, Tracy attempted suicide, taking an overdose of around 200 pills. She left notes saying she couldn't go on without Lee hospitalized and recovering. She spent 2 days under observation. Moran and Ray visited her, and during the visit, Tracy grabbed Moran's hand, whispering, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for what I've done. Before turning away in silence, Ray later remarked to Moran, that's the closest we're going to get to a confession. Meanwhile, inconsistencies in Tracy's story mounted. Investigators could find no evidence of the road rage incident she described. The narrow country lane she claimed the attack occurred on showed no tire marks or signs of a high-speed chase. The blood found at the scene did not match the location she described, and much of Lee's blood was discovered in the back seat of his car. No independent witnesses saw the dark car Tracy claimed had been involved, and there was a suspicious delay between Lee being stabbed and Tracy raising the alarm. Only one nearby resident, a 9-year-old child, reported hearing an argument that night, but she only recalled hearing 2 voices. Not for the inconsistencies were piling up, and the case was far from the simple road rage incident it first appeared to be. Examination of Lee's body revealed nearly 100 strands of Tracy's hair tightly clutched in his hand. Pathologists concluded they had been forcibly taken from her head. Likely during a struggle, Lee also bore multiple blade wounds, and some injuries suggested scissors might have been used, pointing investigators toward a Swiss Army knife as the murder weapon. Blood patterns on Tracy's clothing further contradicted her story, instead of showing transfer from holding Lee. As he lay dying, the blood formed a splash pattern. Testing confirmed a stain inside her boot, and forensic experts found the imprint of a penknife on the sole during her hospital stay. Tracy visited the bathroom 6 times in 3 hours, likely disposing of the knife in the hospital toilets. Detectives quickly moved, and within days, 27-year-old Tracy Andrews was arrested in connection with Lee Harvey's murder. The same day, she had been discharged from the hospital following her overdose on December 19. She was formally charged. She adamantly denied any involvement, sticking to her story in a surprising and controversial decision. Tracy was granted bail while awaiting trial, and moved in with her mother and stepfather. This caused further heartbreak. For Lee's family, granting bail for a murder charge is extremely rare, as courts must be confident the accused poses no risk of harm. In February 1997, Lee was finally laid to rest. Hundreds turned out to honor him and support the Harvey family. 7 months later, in July, Tracy's trial began at Birmingham Crown Court. On the stand, she maintained her innocence, describing the tumultuous relationship with Lee. She admitted they fought often, but insisted she would never have killed him. "We broke up all the time, but we truly loved each other and always came back stronger," she claimed. But a shocking revelation came during her testimony. Tracy admitted that the miscarriage she had told everyone about had actually been an abortion. Following another fight with Lee, Moran was devastated. Calling Tracy a liar, Tracy angrily shouted and demanded Moran be removed from the courtroom. The judge allowed Moran to stay, but the outburst gave the prosecution a strong lead for cross-examination. After a short trial, Tracy Andrews was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 14 years. The judge remarked, "Only you know what truly happened that night. But we have all witnessed the awful consequences." A year into her sentence, Tracy appealed, claiming she had suffered a miscarriage of justice due to intense media coverage. Her appeal was denied in 1999. She wrote a letter to her lawyer, finally admitting that she had stabbed Lee, but claimed it was self-defense. According to her, a fight escalated. Lee pulled a knife, and in the struggle, she lost control. She expressed guilt, shame, and remorse, stating she hated herself for what happened. Her self-defense claim was widely disputed. Many noted that most stab wounds were in Lee's back, suggesting he had been trying to retreat while in prison. Tracy had also attacked a former partner, demonstrating violent tendencies that made some fear she could harm again. Tracy served the minimum term and was released in 2011. She was ordered to stay at least 25 miles away from Lee's family. Since then, she has married, undergone reconstructive surgery, changed her appearance, and adopted multiple new identities for Lee's family and friends. Her release remains a heavy burden. Moran later wrote a book detailing the case and her family's experiences. She said revisiting the old articles and letters feels surreal, like she is looking at someone else's family. But despite the tragedy, the Harvey family continues to cherish Lee's memory, the charming, funny, honest, and caring son and father they loved. Story 2, Plumstead, Southeast London, a bustling, lively area filled with commons and scenic walking paths. Forming part of the Green Chain Walks, these routes stretched for miles, offering beautiful scenery and a sense of safety to locals. Yet during the 1980s and 1990s, that feeling of security was shattered. A predator stalked the streets of Plumstead, terrorizing the community with a chilling series of crimes, and violent attacks began to terrorize the Green Chain Walks. Investigators quickly realized they were dealing with two distinct patterns. The first involved random assaults in open areas, such as Plumstead Common and Winds Common, appearing unplanned and opportunistic. The second pattern was far more sinister. Calculated, premeditated attacks. The perpetrator would watch and stalk his victims, often striking within the safety of their own homes. Particularly chilling aspect of these attacks was the target: young mothers accompanied by their children. On one occasion, a mother was raped in her upstairs bedroom while her children ate breakfast downstairs. As he left, the attacker coldly warned her, "You should keep your door locked." While police investigated these appalling crimes, the nation was shocked by a brutal murder in Wimbledon, London, an area famous worldwide for its prestigious tennis championships and scenic common. On July 15, 1992, Rachel McHale, born in 1968, took her 2-year-old son Alex and the family dog for a walk on Wimbledon Common. Rachel, who had become a mother in her early 20s, adored her son, her partner, Andre, and she lived nearby. Another dog walker, heading toward a more secluded area of the common, heard a child calling out, "Wake up, Mommy," following the voice. He discovered a horrifying scene. Rachel had been brutally stabbed, slashed, and sexually assaulted. Alex clung to her lifeless body, begging her to wake up. She had been stabbed 49 times in a frenzied, vicious attack and was pronounced dead at the scene. Fortunately, Alex was unharmed. The murder, carried out in broad daylight, sent shockwaves through London. Wimbledon Common, though secluded in parts, was generally a well-trafficked area. making the attack even more terrifying. Rachel's disheveled clothing suggested a sexual motive, and at just 23 years old, she was remembered as a bright, shining light by everyone. Who knew Hertha? Metropolitan Police faced immense pressure to catch the killer before he could strike again. 32 men were questioned, but attention soon fell on one man, Colin Stagg, a social outcast from nearby Rumpton. Stagg often walked his dog on Wimbledon Common and matched descriptions given by witnesses. However, lacking forensic evidence to tie him directly to the crime, the police took a psychological approach. Criminal psychologist Paul Britton was brought in to profile the perpetrator. Stagg's personality and habits aligned closely with the profile, prompting the launch of Operation Estelle, a covert operation designed to see if he would implicate himself. Meanwhile, the Green Chain rapes continued, although not initially linked to Rachel McHale's murder. The assaults grew increasingly violent, with some victims reporting that the attacker was now armed with a knife. One major challenge for investigators was the inconsistent descriptions of the perpetrator, with estimates ranging from 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 8, despite numerous appeals and a widely distributed e-fit. One name repeatedly surfaced: Robert Napper, a Plumstead resident. When officers interviewed him, they quickly ruled him out due to his height, far taller than witness descriptions. Nevertheless, Napper's name continued to come up, and reports of a peeping Tom lurking outside homes, particularly those of lone residents, added further unease following his arrest. The police searched Colin Stagg's flat on Plumstead High Street. It was a single, tidy room, meticulously organized. Among the items discovered was a red metal toolbox containing hunting knives. Officers also found an A2Z map book with routes and locations highlighted, covering parts of the Green Chain Walk. However, none of the items in the toolbox could be linked to the Green Chain rapes. As part of Operation Estelle, the police deployed an undercover officer from the Metropolitan Police Special Operations Group over the course of 5 months. She posed as a woman romantically interested in Stega, friend of someone he had contacted through a Lonely Hearts column. She met with him, spoke on the phone, exchanged letters detailing sexual fantasies, and even arranged in-person meetings on one occasion in Hyde Park. Their conversation turned to Rachel McHale's murder to elicit a confession. The officer claimed she enjoyed hurting people. Stagg replied cautiously, "Please explain. As I live a quiet life, if I've disappointed you, please don't leave me. Nothing like this has ever happened to me." When prompted, "If only you had done the Wimbledon Common murder. If only you had killed her, it would be all right," he firmly said. "I'm terribly sorry, but I haven't through this trust." The officer gathered Stagg's accounts of sexual fantasies, which were then analyzed by criminal psychologist Paul Britton and interpreted as violent. However, Stagg never admitted to Rachel McHale's murder. Despite this, he was arrested for the crime, though he maintained his innocence. Letters detailing his fantasies were presented as evidence, but the judge later criticized this approach. The psychologist involved in designing Operation Estelle said he strongly disagreed with the use of these letters and had not even been aware of them until after they were sent. The case eventually went to trial at the Old Bailey, and the investigation's flaws were laid bare. Mr. Justice Agnell called the investigators' conduct deceptive. In the grossest sense, entrapment evidence was excluded, forcing the prosecution to withdraw the case in September 1994. Stagg was sensationally acquitted. He later reflected on the ordeal. "My life has been ruined by a mixture of half-baked psychological theories and stories written to satisfy the bizarre sexual requests of a police officer. The judge recognized there was never any evidence against me. The law has been upheld. But where is the justice?" Despite his acquittal, the files on Rachel McHale's murder remained open, but no new suspects were being actively pursued. Meanwhile, in Plumstead, another resident lived in quiet fear. Samantha Bissett, 27, resided in a basement flat on the edge of Winds Common with her partner, Conrad, and their 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine. Samantha was an avid photographer, often filming her daughter as she grew known as a feisty and determined woman. She was committed to giving Jasmine the best possible start in life. Jasmine was bright, cheerful, and deeply loved by her parents, sharing a close bond with both. Samantha frequently took Jasmine outdoors, exploring the surrounding grass and wooded areas. But on November 3, 1993, Conrad arrived home to find the flat door locked, assuming Samantha had taken Jasmine out. He let himself in and immediately noticed an unusual stain on the carpet as he moved toward the kitchen. He saw Samantha's clothes strewn across the floor. Robert Napper eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, citing diminished responsibility. Due to psychiatric problems, he was sentenced to be held at the high-security Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, with Napper detained. The brutal murders of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett were resolved, but one case still haunted investigators: the murder of Rachel Nichols. The investigation into Rachel's death had been riddled with missteps. A botched police inquiry and a wrongful arrest left the case stagnant for years. In December 1995, authorities visited Broadmoor to question Napper about Rachel's murder. He refused to cooperate, leaving investigators at a dead end. Time passed, but the case remained unsolved, and the public's demand for justice grew more urgent with each anniversary of Rachel's death. By the early 2000s, advances in DNA technology offered a glimmer of hope. In 2002, Scotland Yard established a dedicated cold case review team to revisit Rachel's murder. This team, composed of current and retired investigators, meticulously combed through witness statements, re-examined files on potential suspects, and explored links to other crimes. They paid close attention to the injuries Rachel sustained in her brutal attack, consulting forensic experts to see if modern DNA methods could yield new evidence. The breakthrough came from Rachel's clothing. Blood samples were carefully lifted and analyzed, revealing a microscopic trace of male DNA that did not belong to Rachel's boyfriend or her young son. While this sample could eliminate innocent parties, it was not enough to directly identify the killer. Forensic teams also re-examined hair samples from Rachel's son, Alex, and discovered traces of paint that could be linked to a metal toolbox. In July 2006, Scotland Yard officers returned to question Napper, now 40 years old, regarding his possible connection to Rachel's murder. After 2 days of intensive interviews, the team finally received the news they had been waiting over a decade to hear. The male DNA from Rachel's clothing matched Robert Napper. The paint found in Alex's hair corresponded to the red toolbox Napper had used to conceal knives and maps. The investigation of Napper's toolbox revealed something remarkable. Maps indicated he had traveled outside his usual area, including the distance between Plumstead and Wimbledon Common. Initially, this distance had led investigators to dismiss him as a suspect. One page, however, showed heavy markings on Isabella Plantation in Richmond Park, near the location of Rachel's murder. On November 28, 2007, Napper was formally charged with Rachel Nichols' murder. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court on December 4th and was granted bail, with the condition that he remain at On January 24, 2008, he entered a plea of not guilty. However, in November of that year, Napper changed his plea, admitting to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. During sentencing, Mr. Justice Griffith Williams emphasized the need to detain Napper indefinitely for public safety, noting that he was an extremely dangerous man, given the severity of his crimes. It is highly unlikely that Napper will ever be released. The resolution of this case also brought justice for Colin Stagg, who had been wrongfully arrested during the investigation into Rachel Nichols' murder. Stagg received a formal public apology from the Metropolitan Police, affirming his innocence. The errors of the early 1990s had caused him significant personal and public turmoil. Keith Petter, the detective in charge of Stagg's investigation, faced intense scrutiny. Despite Stagg's acquittal, Petter continued to suggest his involvement in Rachel's murder. In subsequent interviews, in 2001, during an appearance on the ITV program Real Crime, Petter claimed, "Colin Stagg has been through a version of justice, albeit truncated." These statements highlighted the lasting impact of investigative mistakes, and the importance of careful, evidence-based policing. The Napper case serves as a stark reminder of how complex and delicate criminal investigations can be. From the tragic deaths of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett to the cold case resolution of Rachel Nichols' murder, the story demonstrates the necessity of perseverance, scientific innovation, and rigorous police work. Napper's capture and conviction closed a painful chapter, but it also underscored the failings and lessons that law enforcement must remember when seeking justice for victims throughout these cases. The families of the victims endured unimaginable grief. Samantha and Conrad Bissett's daughter, Jasmine, and Rachel Nichols' young son, Alex, were left to grow up without their mothers. Meanwhile, the community of Plumstead and Wimbledon lived under the shadow of fear, knowing that a predator had stalked their neighborhoods for years. Forensic advancements, particularly in DNA analysis, were pivotal in uncovering the truth. What was once an unsolvable cold case became a landmark investigation, demonstrating the power of modern science in providing closure to families who had waited decades for justice. Napper's crimes spanned years, yet meticulous police work eventually unraveled the truth. Every detail from hair and blood samples to paint traces and maps contributed to the narrative that revealed him as a serial offender responsible for some of the most heinous acts in recent British criminal history. The story also highlights the psychological dimension of crime. Napper's disturbed childhood, psychiatric diagnoses, and antisocial tendencies shaped his trajectory toward violence. His background serves as a grim illustration of how early trauma, combined with untreated mental illness, can manifest in profoundly destructive behavior. Yet, alongside this darkness, the perseverance of law enforcement, forensic scientists, and dedicated cold case teams shines through. Despite years of frustration, missed leads, and initial misdirection, the tireless pursuit of justice ultimately secured accountability for Napper's actions. For the families and communities affected, the resolution of these cases offers a bittersweet sense of closure. While no sentence can truly erase the trauma endured, knowing that Napper is securely detained provides some reassurance that he can no longer harm others. Ultimately, these interwoven stories of murder, assault, investigative missteps, and forensic triumphs serve as a haunting reminder of both human vulnerability and resilience. The victims' lives and the persistence of justice stand as enduring legacies. Amidst the darkness of Napper's crimes after his acquittal, Colin Stagg reflected on his ordeal, questioning whether the public would ever truly believe in his innocence. Detective Keith P.R.W., who had been relentless in pursuing Stagg, retired from the force, only to later face charges of corruption. An internal review revealed that the police had spent an estimated £3 million of public funds attempting to prove Stagg's guilt, all while overlooking vital scientific evidence. Following 14 months in custody, Stagg sued the Metropolitan Police for £1 million in damages. He later co-authored 2 books detailing his experience: Who Really Killed Rachel with novelist David Kessler, and Pariah with journalist Ted Hands. Notably, Pariah was published on the very day Robert Napper appeared in court to enter his plea for Rachel Nichols' murder in 2010. The Independent Police Complaints Commission published a report scrutinizing the conduct of the Metropolitan Police. It described a series of grave errors and stating that if the authorities had acted on early warnings about Napper, including a tip from his own mother, the deaths of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett might have been prevented. Sadly, as the officers involved had mostly retired and a senior official had passed away, no disciplinary action or criminal prosecutions were pursued. The female officer, who went undercover during Operation Estelle, retired in 1998. She later sued the Metropolitan Police and received an out-of-court settlement of £125,000, a decision that drew sharp criticism, particularly from Rachel Nichols' son, who was awarded just £22,000 by the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority. Meanwhile, Paul Britton, the criminal psychologist involved in the investigation, faced charges of professional misconduct, though these were dismissed in 2002 due to procedural delays after the intense media scrutiny surrounding Rachel's murder. Her partner Andre relocated to France with their son, Alex. He authored The Last Thursday in July, a memoir chronicling the grief, public attention, and emotional toll of losing Rachel on August 13, 2008. The Home Office confirmed that Colin Stagg would receive £76,000 in compensation. While Robert Napper's crimes may never be fully measured, the impact on his victims and their families is undeniable. Conrad Elam continues to honor the memory of his partner, Samantha, and their daughter, Jasmine, ensuring their lives and legacies are never forgotten. Andre Nickel also publicly apologized to Colin Stagg for wrongly implicating him in Rachel's murder. In an interview with The Guardian, he reflected, "As a parent, you have to set an example. I can't expect Alex to behave in a certain way if I wasn't prepared to do it myself. I made a mistake based on information from seemingly reliable sources, which unfairly shone a spotlight on him and made his life harder." Alex, Rachel's son, remains close to his father and now lives in Barcelona. He later wrote a book, Letting Go, recounting his journey through grief, loss, and survival. Andre often speaks about seeing Rachel in their son, her intelligence, her playful spirit, and even her elegance and presence. "It's been a marathon," he said, "but I can look at Alex now and feel we're finally in clear water. Mission accomplished. Alex got me through, and he carries Rachel with him." Story 3 begins. This next case takes us to April 2013. In Davis, the most populated city in York County, California. Davis Oliver Jennings North Jr., widely known as Chip, was born in 1925 in Grand Island, Nebraska. He served in the United States Navy during World War II and later pursued a career as an attorney, despite his passion for law. Chip's true love was writing. He devoured classic literature and memorized countless passages. Music was another lifelong pursuit. He had been playing guitar since his 30s, performing in various bands. Chip was also a founding member of the Unitarian Chip. Jennings and Claudia Moran Mopin's story begins at the Unitarian Church of Davis. Claudia, born in 1936, was a spiritual traveler who explored different religions and denominations throughout her life. When she discovered the Unitarian Church, she felt an instant connection, telling her daughter, "My husband is at the Unitarian Church." That husband turned out to be Chip Jennings. The two quickly fell in love and married in 1996. Claudia became a pastoral associate at the church, and both she and Chip were deeply involved in local theater. Friends and family described Claudia as a loving spirit who had the unique ability to make everyone around her feel valued. Their families blended effortlessly. Claudia had 3 children. Chip had 6, plus 2 stepchildren from a previous marriage together. They had 14 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren, creating a large and tight-knit family. By 2013, after 17 years of marriage, the couple was living an idyllic life in a Cowell Boulevard condo, surrounded by love and a supportive community. But that serenity was shattered in April 2013, when the family would face a series of horrifying events. Daniel William Marsh was born on May 14, 1997. Even as a child, he had shown heroism. At just 11 years old, Daniel received the American Red Cross Heroes Award for saving his father, Bill, from a heart attack using CPR. However, 2008 marked a turning point in his life. His parents' marriage fell apart amid a bitter divorce after it was revealed that his mother had an affair with Daniel's former kindergarten teacher. The divorce and betrayal left a deep mark on Daniel. By age 10, he began experiencing dark thoughts and violent fantasies. Fixating on harming his mother's former teacher, he confided in his therapist, revealing a growing fascination with torture and killing. Daniel was diagnosed with adjustment disorder, with depressed mood, and as he entered 7th grade, he began seeing a clinical social worker. In August 2010, he was prescribed Prozac, 1 to 2 capsules daily, in an attempt to manage his mental state. As he entered his teenage years. Daniel's life grew increasingly unstable. He alternated between living with his mother and father, until at age 14, his father permanently kicked him out living with his mother. Daniel struggled with anorexia and was placed in an intensive outpatient program during this time. His medication was adjusted multiple times, Celexa, Lexapro, and then back to Prozac. Along with antipsychotic treatment, doctors noted that Daniel began experiencing derealization, reporting out-of-body experiences several times a week over time. His violent thoughts intensified. He started visualizing harming anyone he saw and developed a disturbing obsession with websites promoting graphic gore and violent content. He began experimenting with fire setting and harming animals. According to a friend, he once strangled a cat in the street, explaining, I hated that cat. He even asked if he could kill his dog. Daniel confided in a school counselor about these dark urges, prompting the police to become involved. He was involuntarily hospitalized, and his medication was again adjusted. Yet, even then, Daniel openly admitted to his school psychologist that he fantasized about killing his classmates, potentially committing a school massacre. When asked if he would act on these thoughts, he reportedly said, I have full confidence that I could hurt these people, despite these alarming admissions. A police assessment determined that Daniel posed no immediate threat to himself or others, and no further action was taken at that time. However, the warning signs were clear. Daniel's mind had become a dangerous storm of violent obsession, mental instability, and escalating aggression. Daniel's adolescence progressed. His violent fantasies became darker and more grotesque. He described in chilling detail how he imagined peeling skin from people, cutting off their eyelids, and performing acts of unspeakable mutilation. He admitted that these were only the surface of his thoughts, and confessed that he had given up trying to fight them despite the extreme nature of his confessions. Authorities were not alerted at the time, as there were no identified victims and no immediate evidence of an imminent threat. Daniel made no effort to conceal his disturbing impulses, and increasingly divulged his secrets to friends on several occasions. He even told them that if he were caught after committing a murder, he would simply claim insanity as a defense, but the horrors he fantasized about would soon become horrifying reality. On the morning of the attack, Chip Jennings and Claudia Moran Maupin were conspicuously absent from their church. No one had heard from them, and repeated calls to their home went unanswered later. Chip failed to appear for a scheduled performance with his band, an unprecedented act for a musician known for nearly 5 decades of reliability, concerned. Chip's son Robert visited the couple's condo, but left assuming they had gone out of town. As the evening approached, with still no word from the couple, family members contacted authorities, requesting a welfare check. Claudia's daughter, Laura, accompanied police officers to the condo. When no one answered the doorbell, Laura circled to the back and discovered a window with the screen slashed. Looking inside the bedroom, she saw bloodstains. Using a flashlight, officers could make out the unthinkable: the bodies of 87-year-old Chip and 76-year-old Claudia. Both had suffered more than 60 stab wounds, and their bodies had been mutilated. Investigators reported that a mobile phone had been placed inside Claudia's abdomen, and a drinking glass had been shoved into Chip's body. The Yolo County District Attorney called the murders the most horrific, depraved crime I've ever encountered, noting that the shocking brutality left the Davis community in a state of terror and disbelief. Task forces from multiple jurisdictions, including 25 FBI agents, were immediately assigned to the investigation. However, the crime scene yielded no forensic evidence, no DNA, fingerprints, or footprints, and nothing of value appeared stolen. Police were unable to determine if the crime involved a single perpetrator or multiple assailants. The lack of a clear motive left investigators questioning whether the killer was someone close to Chip and Claudia, possibly even having access to the condo and cutting the window as a diversion. As the investigation expanded, Daniel's family came under intense scrutiny. Police briefly investigated Oliver, Chip's grandson, due to his diagnosis of schizophrenia. Robert, Chip's son, and Oliver's father, described enduring over 2 days of questioning, sometimes exceeding 12 hours at a time, without a lawyer present, while Robert cooperated fully. Authorities noted the coincidence of the carpet at his home having been steam cleaned on the same day as the murders, although he explained it as mere bad timing. The timing appeared suspicious. Investigators also focused on a disturbing drawing by Tony, Robert's son, which depicted a man holding a knife over 2 children in bed. Both Tony and Oliver had been very close to Chip, and the family insisted that the boys would never commit violence against their grandparents. Despite this, Tony felt deeply persecuted by the suspicion placed on him and carried the psychological burden for years. Tragically, 3 years later, Tony took his own life. Meanwhile, the real killer could not contain his pride on the day Chip and Claudia were discovered. Daniel Marsh confessed to a close friend that he had committed the murders in the days that followed. He continued to tell multiple people, including his girlfriend. Recounting the details of the attack with disturbing pride, he displayed a total lack of remorse. Describing the killings as the best experience of his life, Daniel even showed friends items linking him directly to the crime scene. The knife, gloves, ski cap, boots, and jacket he had worn that night. His ex-girlfriend, fearing for her safety after an incident in which Daniel had entered her home, eventually broke ties with him. But by this point, information about Daniel's confessions began to circulate among his friends, who finally realized the gravity of the situation. One friend reached out to Daniel's father, Bill, recounting the confessions and warning him about his son's potential danger. Initially, Bill did not believe it, however, as corroborating reports emerged. Authorities were contacted, setting in motion the investigation that would finally confront Daniel Marsh with the full extent of his crimes. Once the authorities were alerted, a full-scale investigation into Daniel Marsh's actions began. Police immediately secured his residence, collecting any items that could link him to the brutal murders of Chip and Claudia. Forensic experts meticulously examined the condo and Daniel's personal belongings, confirming that the knife, gloves, jacket, and boots he had shown to friends were indeed used in the crime. DNA swabs from the weapons matched traces found at the scene, providing undeniable evidence of his involvement. Investigators also discovered chilling written notes and digital entries in which Daniel recounted his fascination with gore, violence, and the act of killing itself. Psychologists who reviewed Daniel's history noted that his violent tendencies had been apparent for years. His early childhood trauma, his parents' acrimonious divorce, exposure to substance abuse, and tumultuous family dynamics had left deep psychological scars. The combination of untreated mental health issues, early exposure to violent fantasies, and obsession with serial killers created a dangerous and unpredictable pattern. His fixation on gore websites and prior incidents of harming animals served as ominous indicators that his violent thoughts were escalating into real-world action. Daniel was taken into custody without incident. Law enforcement, fully aware of the danger he posed, treated him as a higher-risk detainee. He initially showed no remorse, remaining calm and even slightly proud. When recounting his actions to investigators, he admitted that he had planned the murders meticulously, choosing the timing and method to maximize shock and impact. The slashed window was not random. It had been used to divert attention from his true entry point. During interrogation, Daniel described how he had selected Chip and Claudia as victims. He explained that he had fantasized about committing the murders for months, envisioning the scene in his mind over and over. He even rehearsed the steps, deciding in advance how he would use a knife, where he would place the bodies, and how he would manipulate the scene post-mortem to enhance the shock value. Investigators were struck by the level of detail and the absence of any empathy in his recounting. Psychiatric evaluations painted a complex picture. Daniel was diagnosed with a combination of severe personality disorder and psychotic features. including delusions and dissociation. Experts testified that while he understood the difference between right and wrong, his compulsions were so overpowering that he was unable to control his violent impulses. These findings would later play a pivotal role in the legal proceedings. The trial was a media sensation. Courtrooms were packed with journalists and members of the community, many of whom had known Chip and Claudia personally. Testimonies from friends, family, and school officials established Daniel's history of violence, obsessive behavior, and unreported threats. Psychological experts provided chilling accounts of his childhood, his early fascination with death, and his documented confessions to friends and family. Each detail painted a portrait of a deeply disturbed individual who had been capable of premeditated, sadistic murder for years. During the proceedings, Daniel's defense argued diminished responsibility due to his psychiatric conditions. The prosecution emphasized the meticulous planning, the multiple victims, and the clear evidence of intent. The judge and jury faced a difficult task, weighing years of psychological assessment against the incontrovertible evidence of his brutal actions. The trial delved deeply into Daniel's psyche, exploring how childhood trauma, untreated mental illness, and escalating violent fantasies converged to produce catastrophic results. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned a verdict acknowledging the combination of premeditation and psychiatric disturbance. Daniel Marsh was found guilty of multiple counts of murder, but was sentenced to a high-security psychiatric facility rather than a conventional prison. The court emphasized the protection of the public as the paramount concern. Noting the extreme danger he posed, it was determined that he would remain confined indefinitely, with treatment focused on managing his psychosis and violent impulses under strict supervision. The aftermath of the case left a lasting impact on the community. Friends and family of Chip and Claudia mourned their loss while also grappling with the disturbing realization of Daniel's prolonged trajectory toward violence. Tony and Oliver's experiences underscored the collateral damage inflicted on those close to criminal investigations, particularly when suspicion falls on innocent parties. Meanwhile, mental health professionals and law enforcement agencies reviewed the case in depth, highlighting the need for early intervention. When children display violent fantasies and obsessive behavior, Daniel's crimes also sparked discussions on the importance of reporting and monitoring potential threats. His repeated confessions to friends and his history of harming animals were red flags that, if taken more seriously at the time, might have prevented the tragic deaths of Chip and Claudia. The case ultimately served as a grim reminder of how untreated mental illness, unreported threats, and failure to act on warning signs can culminate in catastrophic violence. In the years following Daniel's incarceration, families affected by the murders worked to rebuild their lives. Memorials were established for Chip and Claudia, celebrating their contributions to the Davis community and preserving the memory of their love and generosity. Daniel's case became a reference point for both law enforcement and mental health professionals, demonstrating the intersection of severe psychological disorders, violent impulses, and the tragic consequences of inaction. Though the criminal justice system ultimately contained Daniel, the emotional scars left on his victims' families, friends, and the wider community remain. The story of his descent into violence serves as both a cautionary tale and a somber reminder of the consequences when early warning signs are overlooked. Daniel Marsh spent several hours at the police station, recounting everything in harrowing detail. The following day, on June 17th, the now 16-year-old was brought in for further questioning by a high school resource officer. He faced Detective Ariel Panna and FBI Special Agent Chris Campion. Daniel's demeanor had changed dramatically. He spent over 3 hours crying and initially denying any involvement in the murders. However, when Detective Panna played a recording of a phone call in which Daniel was implicated, his denials collapsed, and he began confessing, "I did research on psychopaths." Daniel admitted, "I looked up sociopaths and psychopaths because I found it fascinating. The more I learned, the more I could relate. I don't feel sympathy for people. I don't feel empathy. I just want to hurt them. I want to kill them, but I don't want to want that. I wish I wasn't like this. Daniel described leaving his mother's house between 2 and 3 a.m. Armed with a 6-inch knife, intent on killing, he wandered the streets of Davis, searching for an unlocked door or window. He eventually targeted 406 Coel Boulevard. Just 2 doors down from his father's residence, he cut through a window screen and climbed inside, waiting in the living room until the sounds of snoring drew him to the bedroom. Claudia awoke to see him. Screaming in terror, Daniel stabbed her repeatedly while she begged for her life. Chip awoke next, and Daniel turned the knife on him, continuing the assault. Even after they had died, he recounted the acts in gruesome detail, and admitted to keeping bloodied clothing and the knife in his mother's garage as souvenirs. He also revealed that he had wrapped tape around his shoes to avoid leaving footprints. Agent Campion took a startling approach during the interrogation. "You've said you have thoughts about killing almost everyone you meet. How would you kill me?" he asked. Daniel responded matter-of-factly. "Choke you with your tie, beat your face into a mirror until it broke and cut your arteries with the glass, gouge your eyes out and smash your face into the wall." Nothing personal. Daniel was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, including special enhancements for the use of a deadly weapon. He was to be tried as an adult, despite being a minor, making him ineligible for the death penalty, but exposing him to a maximum sentence of 52 years to life. His family faced a grim reality. Married Chip's daughter struggled to reconcile the horrifying facts with the belief that her father, a lawyer who had always fought for the underdog, would want justice to prevail. She insisted he would not have wanted the death penalty, but would expect accountability for such monstrous crimes initially. Daniel pleaded not guilty, but later entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense team, comprised of top public defenders, argued that imposing the maximum sentence on a juvenile would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. They emphasized the influence of Daniel's history of psychiatric treatment and medications on his mental state, though the prosecution countered that his violent fantasies and impulses predated any medication. Dr. Matthew Sear, a psychiatrist called by the defense, testified that Daniel was mentally ill, but ultimately sane and responsible for his actions. The prosecution highlighted Daniel's long-standing fascination with violence, his premeditated planning, and the calculated nature of the murders. Daniel Marsh's trial began on September 2, 2014, with 17-year-old Daniel in the defendant's seat before Judge David Reed. The courtroom was packed, reflecting the widespread shock and horror the murders had inspired. Daniel's meticulous planning, the cold-blooded execution of the crimes, and the horrific post-mortem mutilation of Chip and Claudia left the community grappling with the full extent of his depravity. Daniel Marsh was brought into the courthouse through a discreet side entrance. A jacket was pulled over his head to shield him from public view. Though being tried as an adult, he was still a juvenile, and the court ensured he remained separate from adult inmates through this hidden doorway. The 16-year-old entered the courtroom, his face unseen by the public, including his father and family friends. Marsh offered one-word answers as he waived his right to a preliminary hearing. Within 10 days, bail was denied, and whispers of relief echoed from the victims' relatives. Marsh faced charges for the brutal murders of 87-year-old Oliver Chip Northrum and 76-year-old Claudia Maupin. In April, friends of Marsh expressed disbelief, recalling the joy and lightheartedness he displayed in their time together. Prosecutors, however, kept the motive undisclosed, and any potential connection between Marsh and the couple remained unclear. Notably, Marsh's father had lived nearby until recently, selling his home because Marsh was being tried as an adult. His name and face were released to the public, though his defense attorney had sought to bar cameras from the courtroom, a request the judge denied. He was allowed to appear in a dress shirt and tie instead of jail clothing, a measure intended to prevent bias from potential jurors seeing him in the media. The defense argued that the effects of Marsh's psychiatric medications, combined with his mental health issues, had triggered uncontrollable rage and violent impulses, rendering him temporarily insane. The prosecution countered that the murders were carefully planned and premeditated. Witnesses included Marsh's former friends and girlfriend, as well as his therapist and psychiatrist, who all testified about his troubling behaviors and psychological history. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated less than 2 hours on September 26, 2014. Daniel William Marsh was found guilty on both counts of first-degree murder, including all special circumstances. The jury also unanimously determined that Marsh had been sane when he committed the murders. Rejecting the insanity defense, Judge David Reed imposed the maximum sentence: life in prison with parole eligibility. After 52 years, he handed down 25 years to life for each murder, plus 2 additional years for the special enhancements. Judge Reed emphasized that Marsh had mutilated the victims out of curiosity and pride, and that his crimes were premeditated, deliberate, and not impulsive. Legislative changes in California would later affect juvenile sentencing. Senate Bill 260 allowed juveniles with sentences under 25 years to life to become eligible for parole after their 20th year of incarceration, while longer sentences delayed eligibility until their 25th year. Proposition 57, passed in 2016, required juvenile court judges to decide whether young offenders should be tried as adults. In 2018, the California Supreme Court ruled that this could be applied retroactively for unresolved cases. Daniel's 2014 conviction was conditionally reversed in February 2018, prompting a review to determine whether he should continue serving an adult sentence. Prosecutors filed motions to have him return to adult court, while legal debates over his age and eligibility for juvenile sentencing raged on. Governor Jerry Brown signed Senate Bill 1391, prohibiting juveniles under 16 from being tried as adults, a decision that sparked fierce opposition from both prosecutors and the families of Chip and Claudia. Hundreds of citizens wrote letters expressing concern that Marsh might avoid adult sentencing. Governor Brown acknowledged the outcry, but emphasized the importance of rehabilitation, stating, "We must consider whether society should attempt to reform the youngest offenders before consigning them to adult prisons, where the risk of becoming lifelong criminals is far higher." He did note that the testimonies of Chip and Claudia's family had weighed heavily on him amidst the legal battles. A video surfaced on YouTube showing Daniel Marsh giving a TED-style talk from prison. In it, he detailed the alleged abuse and challenges of his life, offering the public a rare window into his troubled psyche. The video sparked outrage and disbelief across Davis and the wider community. Watching Marsh speak so calmly about his past, detailing struggles and grievances, many were reminded of the chilling premeditation behind his crimes. While some experts argued the video revealed a troubled mind in need of rehabilitation, for the families of Chip and Claudia, it was a painful reminder of the lives stolen and the horror inflicted. In the months following the conviction reversal, legal teams prepared for a series of hearings to determine whether Marsh would remain in the adult correctional system or be transferred to juvenile facilities. Under the new laws, prosecutors pushed hard to maintain the adult classification, arguing that his actions had demonstrated a level of calculated evil that could not be ignored. Defense attorneys, however, stressed that Marsh was still a child during the murders and that his upbringing, mental health history, and prior psychiatric interventions must be considered. They highlighted his history of severe childhood trauma, depression, derealization episodes, and the influence of violent media on his adolescent development. Public opinion remained sharply divided. Some citizens viewed Marsh as a monster whose crimes deserved the harshest punishment, insisting he should serve the maximum adult sentence. Others, influenced by SB 1391 and emerging juvenile justice philosophies, argued that even the most extreme acts by a minor must be balanced with the possibility of rehabilitation. Community forums, news segments, and editorials debated the issue endlessly, placing the spotlight not just on Marsh, but on how society handles violent juvenile offenders throughout the proceedings. The families of Chip and Claudia continued to grieve and advocate for justice. Mary Northrum, Chip's daughter, spoke publicly about the trauma of losing both her father and stepmother in such a violent way. She emphasized that while she understood the need for juvenile rehabilitation in theory, the reality of her parents' deaths demanded accountability. Claudia's daughter, Laura, echoed similar sentiments, recounting the anguish of discovering the slashed window and the bloodied bodies inside the condo. Their voices became central to the public discourse, underscoring the human cost behind legal and legislative debates. Meanwhile, Marsh remained in custody. Isolated but not silent, reports indicated he continued to exhibit fascination with violence and the macabre, often writing about his thoughts and experiences. Psychologists and correctional officers monitored him closely, aware that his intelligence and meticulous planning, coupled with his mental health history, made him a high-risk individual. Despite his age, it became clear that Marsh's capacity for manipulation, planning, and recounting details of his crimes demonstrated a disturbing level of sophistication. The legal journey culminated in a series of appeals and hearings over the next several years. In 2019, the California Court of Appeal ultimately ruled that Marsh would remain in adult custody, citing the gravity and premeditation of his crimes. They concluded that the murder of Chip and Claudia was not a spontaneous act of juvenile impulsivity, but a carefully orchestrated attack that warranted adult sentencing. The decision drew mixed reactions: relief for the families, frustration from those advocating juvenile rehabilitation, and renewed media attention on the role of mental health in violent youth crimes for the Northrum and Maupin families. The ruling provided a measure of closure, while nothing could undo the loss of Chip and Claudia. It affirmed that justice, however delayed, had been served. Mary and Laura, along with their extended family, continued to honor the couple's memory, speaking at community events and sharing stories of their warmth, generosity, and resilience. They sought to highlight the impact Chip and Claudia had on their community, ensuring that their legacies would not be defined solely by the horror of their deaths. In the broader context, the Marsh case became a pivotal reference in California's ongoing debate over juvenile justice, mental health intervention, and the limits of rehabilitation. Lawmakers, prosecutors, and psychologists examined the case in discussions on how best to identify at-risk youth, intervene effectively, and prevent tragedies. The legal precedents and legislative reforms influenced subsequent cases, shaping how courts approach juvenile offenders charged with serious violent crimes. Yet, despite the legal and legislative focus, the most lasting impact remained with the families. Every public hearing, every new report on Marsh, reminded them of a future they had been forced to face without Chip and Claudia. Through their advocacy, writing, and public speaking, they transformed grief into action, ensuring that lessons were learned and that the community remained vigilant. Daniel Marsh, meanwhile, remains incarcerated, serving the sentence imposed by Judge Reed. His youth, his psychiatric history, and his disturbing behavior continue to be studied in legal, psychological, and criminological circles, while the story of Chip and Claudia Northrum and their tragic deaths remains one of the darkest chapters in Davis County history. It also stands as a stark illustration of the challenges inherent in balancing justice, rehabilitation, and societal protection in cases involving violent juveniles. The video, in which Daniel Marsh claimed he had faced challenges in his life and portrayed himself as a reformed individual deserving another chance, caused immense pain and distress for the families of Chip Northrum and Claudia Maupin, as well as for the wider community affected by his actions. Though YouTube removed the video within 2 days, its impact lingered. The family described the takedown as a small victory, but emphasized that it was nothing compared to the ongoing legal battle that lay ahead. Marsh's defense team moved quickly to request a continuance, aiming to delay the hearing until after January, at which point Senate Bill 1391, Legislation that would protect minors under 16 from being tried as adults would take effect. Prosecutors immediately countered, arguing that the case must be addressed under the law as it stood, not under anticipated future statutes. Despite the defense's efforts, the motion for continuance was denied, and the hearing proceeded. During the hearing, Daniel Marsh addressed the court directly, explaining why he believed his case should be tried in juvenile court rather than as an adult. He admitted that he struggled to recall the events of the murders accurately, stating, "I haven't wanted to remember it because it was unbelievably horrific and horrendous. It's hard for me to even wrap my mind around what I did, and I've been afraid to face it." The prosecution pressed forward, calling forensic psychologist Matthew Logan to testify. Logan detailed Marsh's evaluation using the psychopathy checklist, noting that Marsh had scored an astonishing 358 out of a possible 40, a level of psychopathy rarely seen. The courtroom was tense as the judge prepared to rule. Ultimately, Judge McAdams sided with the prosecution, ruling that Marsh would remain in state prison to continue serving his adult sentence. He stated, "The risk posed by potentially releasing Marsh is not one worth taking. There is virtually no chance of rehabilitation before he turns 25. Victoria, Claudia's daughter, voiced her relief at the decision. Yet the legal maneuvers did not end there. Less than a month later, Marsh filed a writ, requesting that the transfer order be reviewed. His legal team argued that Judge McAdams had abused his discretion by holding the hearing prior to the effective date of Senate Bill 1391. The writ, however, was only the beginning of a new wave of appeals and legal challenges. On December 14, 2018, Marsh's attorneys filed a petition requesting a review of the order denying the writ. The case was ultimately denied by the California Supreme Court on February 13, 2019. At that point, with the Senate bill in full effect, Marsh's team filed another appeal, requesting that his 2014 conviction be retroactively considered under the new juvenile protections. Marsh's crimes, murdering Oliver Northrum, 87, and Claudia Maupin, 76, in 2013, when he was only 15, remained among the most notorious in California history. The new law prohibited anyone under 16 from being tried as an adult, raising the possibility that Marsh could have his conviction reviewed and potentially face juvenile sentencing standards. 48 Hours correspondent Aaron Morardi, who had followed the case for years, explained the stakes. "There is a strong belief in the U.S. that young offenders can and should be rehabilitated, but Marsh may be a rare exception. Authorities argue that his level of planning, sadism, and lack of empathy distinguishes him from typical juvenile offenders." As Marsh, now 24 years old, sought early release from prison under SB 1391, the legal battle intensified. His attorney, Mark Greenberg, argued that he should never have been tried as an adult, emphasizing his age at the time of the crime and his mental health history. Prosecutors, led by Michelle Newcomb, countered, maintaining that the verdict from 2018 was final and that revisiting the case would unnecessarily prolong the trauma for Chip and Claudia's families. Victoria Heard, Claudia's eldest daughter, publicly recalled the harrowing events. Daniel Marsh confessed in 2014 and was tried as an adult under California law due to the heinous nature of his crimes. Our family endured a 5-week trial that culminated in a 52-year to-life sentence. He is currently serving his term at Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. While new laws allow for the possibility of reviewing juvenile sentencing, nothing can undo the suffering he caused, adding to the disturbing details. While incarcerated, Marsh had tattooed images on his body depicting the wounds he inflicted on Chip and Claudia. The family viewed this as further evidence of his lack of remorse and continuing obsession with his crimes. The legal battle was set to continue, with a hearing scheduled for August 18, 2021, in the California Court of Appeals, where Marsh would seek to have his case reconsidered retroactively under SB 1391. The Marsh case remains a deeply complex and emotionally charged legal matter, balancing the principles of juvenile rehabilitation against the severity of violent crimes. It has sparked ongoing debates over the limits of juvenile justice, the role of mental health in sentencing, and society's obligation to protect its citizens while addressing the potential for reform in young offenders. Next week marks yet another critical hearing for the family of Chip Northrum and Claudia Maupin. "This is the third time we've faced someone who brutally murdered my parents," said one family member. If Daniel Marsh were to succeed in his appeal on August 18th, he could potentially be released as early as May 14th, 2022 unsupervised, without parole, and with a sealed record, having served only 8 years. The thought sent shivers through the family, who had endured years of legal battles, appeals, and procedural twists. CBS 13's Marley Gurr spoke with the family after yet another tense court process. "They've been through so much," Marley reported, "weeks of waiting on pins and needles, hoping justice would hold." Marsh, who was originally sentenced to 52 years to life, had petitioned for retroactive consideration under SB 1391, legislation barring teens under 16 from being tried as adults in California today. The appellate court ruled that Marsh would remain in prison. "One can't wish him ill, but I am grateful he won't be walking the streets again," said a family spokesperson. The potential release, which would have coincided with Marsh's 25th birthday, is now off the table. SB 1391, part of California's broader juvenile justice reforms under Prop 57, was enacted to focus on rehabilitation rather than automatic adult sentencing for minors. Despite multiple hearings, appeals, and legal challenges, Marsh's sentence remains 52 years to life because he was convicted as a juvenile. He is still technically eligible for parole after 25 years, meaning he could see release in his early 40s, if granted. The ripple effect of Marsh's crimes extended far beyond the victim's family. FBI Special Agent Chris Campion, who had interrogated Marsh, admitted the thought of his potential release filled him with dread. "He is in the top 3 people I am most afraid of," Campion said. "I truly believe he was a serial killer in the making for the family and friends of Chip and Claudia, already scarred by the brutality of their loss." The uncertainty surrounding Marsh's appeal only added to the emotional burden. Claudia's daughter, Victoria, described the family as exhausted, but determined. They remained vocal throughout the trial and press conferences, committed to keeping the memory of Chip and Claudia alive and ensuring that justice continued to be served. Story, for now, shifts focus to another young life, lost far too soon. Tia Christine Sharp was full of energy, a girl with an infectious spark, whose potential stretched far beyond her years. All of that was cruelly taken from her. Born on June 30th, 2000, to Stephen and Natalie Sharp, Tia grew up in a loving, close-knit family in Cooden, South London. Even after her parents separated during her infancy, the bond between Tia, her mother, and her maternal grandmother Christine remained unshakable. Christine described the trio as inseparable friends as well as family. "I wouldn't bat an eyelid if she called me Mom," she said, recalling the closeness and trust they shared. Natalie echoed that sentiment, highlighting how deeply Tia adored her mother and how inseparable they had been throughout her childhood. Tia's relationship with her father was maintained through holidays until tensions between her parents strained the connection. As she grew into her teenage years, she became confident and outspoken, known for her courage and her determination to make her voice heard. Her mother described her as often the loudest presence in the room. A girl unafraid of standing up for herself. In 2002, Christine was employed as a barmaid in a pub in Rains Park, southwest London, where she met Stuart Hazel, a man 10 years her junior. Their relationship began in 2007, with Stuart moving into Christine's home in New Addington. Notably, Natalie had previously had a brief relationship with Stuart before he became involved with Christine. Stuart formed a close bond with Tia, who affectionately called him Granddad, a nickname shared by Tia's younger brothers. Despite Tia's popularity at school and her strong academic performance, attendance issues emerged, prompting concern. By 2008, Social services became involved due to reports of Natalie and her partner's cannabis use, marking the first time external authorities intervened in Tia's life. A report issued by social services noted that while Tia had not suffered any neglect or abuse, her family environment was considered dysfunctional following a thorough investigation into Tia's home life. Social workers concluded in November 2011 that no further assessment was necessary. Instead, they requested that her school monitor her well-being and report any concerns. Tia frequently spent nights at her grandmother Christine's home, often accompanied by her step-grandfather, Stuart. Even when Christine worked late shifts, Tia would stay with Stuart, highlighting the closeness she shared with Ben. June 2012. Tia celebrated her birthday with her mother and grandmother. She had the option to bring a friend along but chose Stuart, demonstrating the strong bond between them. By August 2012, Tia sent messages to Christine and Stuart, asking if she could stay for a couple of days. Stuart texted her mother, Natalie, confirming she was welcome, even though Christine would not be home at the time. Excited, Tia kissed her mother goodbye and set off for her grandmother's house on Thursday, August 2nd. Stuart met Tia as she disembarked from the tram. At 4:50 p.m. CCTV footage captured them shopping in New Addington together later that evening. Christine called the house to check in. Stuart confirmed everything was fine, noting that they were playing on the PlayStation together the following day. Friday, August 3rd, Christine returned from work, and Stuart informed her that Tia had gone into Kudan to buy new shoes at the Wick Gift Center, approximately 5 miles away. By 6 p.m., she had not returned, prompting Christine to call Natalie, who confirmed she had not seen Tia either. They attempted to contact her via text and Facebook with no response, hoping a transport delay had caused the delay. The family drove around the area searching for her. By 10 p.m., with no sign of Tia, Christine, Stuart, and Natalie went to the police station to report her missing. Stuart told investigators he had last seen Tia around midday before she went into Kudan. A neighbor also reported seeing her leaving the property. Searches of the grandmother's home yielded no trace of Tia. Confirming she was not there, the police expanded their search to the surrounding area. News of the missing 12-year-old quickly spread, with major outlets covering the story. Stuart Hazel was actively participating in the searches. Authorities noted that Tia had only taken a small amount of money with her and had left her travel card and mobile phone behind, which was highly unusual. Area Commander Neil Basu emphasized that the case was being treated as a missing person inquiry, and there were no suspects at that time. The family wants Tia home. They miss her terribly, he said. I want to assure you that the Met is doing everything possible to locate her and support her family. To give a sense of scale, over the past 3 days, we've redirected Olympic resources to assist in the search. Over 100 additional uniformed officers were deployed across the Kudan and Mitcham areas, including 40 detectives and 40 specialist search officers. We've collected over 800 hours of CCTV footage from buses and trams, reviewing more than 120 hours in real time, and this continues around the clock. He went on to thank the local communities for their support, noting the generosity of volunteers and the Pathfinders charity in New Addington, who distributed leaflets and assisted in the search. Please continue to help look for Tia, Basu urged. The family was devastated. Natalie told local media, "We feel terrible. We think she's been taken, but we don't know. There's no CCTV, no information. I wish I could tell you something. My baby girl walked out and vanished on August 7th. A press conference was held, during which DCI Nick Scholar provided a detailed description of Tia. He released a CCTV image from Thursday evening, taken just before she disappeared. In the footage, she wore a yellow vest top with an animal print, faded tight jeans, and black Nike trainers with a pink swoosh. Slightly different from earlier reports that listed Ugg boots. Tia's uncle, David Sharp, also made a heartfelt plea for her return. Tia is a 12-year-old girl. She has never run away. She is playful and responsible, familiar with the area. If anyone sees her, please contact the police immediately. He expressed gratitude to the authorities and the public for their support and for helping keep the search active. I urge you to keep searching day and night. The family pleaded, please don't stop. We want Tia found. Keep doing what you're doing over the following days. The public reported 55 potential sightings of Tia, though police were unable to verify any of them. Stuart Hazel, having been the last person to see Tia alive, felt increasing pressure and suspicion fell on him in an effort to clear his name. He gave an interview to ITV on August 9th with investigative journalist and former officer Mark Williams Thomas, adamantly denying any involvement in her disappearance. If people believe what they read in the papers, that's their choice. Stewart said, I know in my heart that Tia walked out of my house. I saw her. She made her way down the path. What happened afterward? I don't know. We're stuck inside here, reading papers full of accusations and bad-mouthing. I appreciate the intention to help, but the best help is finding her and bringing her home. During the interview, Christine returned home, prompting Stewart to remove his microphone and pause the conversation to comfort her. With no sign of Tia, the police conducted another thorough search of the house, this time with the assistance of trained dogs, but still, they found nothing. Week after Tia was reported missing, on Friday, August 10th, Stewart left the house early. Later that morning, Christine noticed a strange smell in the home, but could not locate its source when the police arrived. They instructed her to leave so they could conduct a final search. During this fourth and final search, officers discovered a body in the attic due to the extreme heat and the fact the body had been wrapped and stored. Decomposition had progressed to the point that visual identification was impossibly cut in. Central MP Gavin Barwell noted that while the police had yet to formally confirm the identity, the discovery was a devastating blow to Tia's family and the community, who had worked tirelessly for her safe return. A post-mortem began the same day, but had to be paused due to the condition of the body. By August 16th, dental records confirmed the body belonged to Tia Sharp. The post-mortem could not determine a definitive cause of death, as decomposition made analysis extremely difficult. Experts indicated that the delay in finding the body had severely hampered the ability to determine how she had died, though reports suggested smothering as a possible cause, which was never officially confirmed. Area Commander Neil Basu stated that the immediate priority was supporting the devastated family and helping them process the tragic news with Tia's body discovered. The investigation quickly focused on Stuart Hazel. Authorities soon realized he was missing and spotted him on CCTV buying a bottle of vodka in South London. The public was warned not to approach him, but to call emergency services. Police rapidly mobilized, and following a tip from a member of the public, Hazel was arrested at 8:25 a.m. on Cannon Hill Common in Morton as he was taken away. Bystanders shouted abuse at the police van. Later that evening, Christine Hazel was arrested on suspicion of murder, along with a neighbor suspected of assisting an offender. Natalie, T.I.'s mother, had to watch as her daughter's body was removed from the home due to the condition of T.I.'s body. She was not allowed to see it following the discovery. Members of the community laid tributes near a garage close to Christine's house, which remained cordoned off. Christine was later released on bail, but was prohibited from contacting Natalie or her other grandchildren as police continued their investigation. The disturbing truth about Stuart Hazel began to emerge. He came from a troubled and highly dysfunctional background. His father had been imprisoned, and his mother was a sex worker, leading to Hazel spending periods in care. He struggled in school, often skipping classes, and reportedly had a low IQ. Hazel later disclosed that he had been raped at age 16 over the years. He accumulated 30 prior convictions, including drug dealing, burglary, theft, criminal damage, racially motivated violence, and grievous bodily harm. He had served multiple prison sentences and continued to engage in reckless behavior, often fueled by substance abuse. In 2010, he was convicted for carrying a machete and received a 12-month custodial sentence despite his violent and criminal history. Christine stood by Hazel, insisting she had never witnessed him display violent behavior in the home. She maintained that, although he drank and had a criminal record, he was a gentle presence within the household. Christine had been willing to overlook Stuart Hazel's troubled past before they met. Hoping to build a life together, she was unaware, however, of the extent of his drug abuse and the increasingly sinister thoughts he harbored as Tia grew. Hazel's obsession with her intensified. He became fixated, convinced that Tia reciprocated his feelings in the final year of her life. His behavior escalated. He secretly filmed her, first while she applied cream to her legs, and later while she slept. Senior Investigating Officer Nick Scalola described one of these incidents. Hazel had filmed Tia in her sleep, moving close before pulling back when she stirred. He then angled the camera to catch his shadow looming over her. He had also tampered with the bathroom door and bedroom light fixture, apparently to create a spy hole. Investigators later discovered Hazel had been seeking increasingly violent and extreme pornography, including material depicting pedophilia. Forensic psychologist Dr. Carrie Nixon suggested that Hazel may have made sexual advances toward Tia and murdered her when she rejected him or threatened to tell her mother. Many wondered why it took 4 searches to locate Tia's body. Investigators apologized to the family, acknowledging human error in the delay. Commander Neil Basu personally apologized to Tia's mother and confirmed a review would be conducted to prevent such failures in the future. On August 23rd, Police Commissioner Bernard Hogenhow addressed the issue with Christine, released on bail. Investigators focused on Stuart Hazel in his defense statement. Hazel claimed that he and Tia had been playing, during which she fell down the stairs unharmed. He said that after drinking heavily that night, he passed out and awoke to find her dead. He admitted to placing her body in the attic, wedging it between rafters and covering it with debris near her body. Tia's clothing and broken glasses were found carefully wrapped in plastic. Christine was ultimately cleared of any involvement, and, on December 7th, was formally announced to face no charges. Earlier searches had uncovered 2 memory cards, one hidden in a door frame. The cards contained photos and videos, some deleted, and later recovered. The final image depicted Tia in a sexually suggestive pose, with the pathologist confirming she was likely deceased at the time it was taken. Other images showed Hazel posing similarly, alongside voyeuristic photos of Tia while alive. In the early hours of August 12th, Hazel was formally charged with Tia's murder. He appeared via video link at Camberwell Green Magistrates Court on August 13th, confirming his identity and address. No plea was entered, and the case was committed to the Old Bailey in London. Hazel was remanded to Belmarsh Prison, held in isolation for his safety while awaiting trial. He wrote to his father, continuing to insist that Tia's death was accidental and denying any sexual motive. Tia Sharp was cremated on September 14th following a private family funeral. The neighbor initially arrested alongside Christine was later charged with wasting police time for falsely reporting a sighting of Tia. He appeared at Cooden Magistrates Court on February 28, 2013, and was released on bail for a 1-day trial. On July 29th. On August 5th, he was convicted and sentenced to 5 months in prison. The trial of Stuart Hazel commenced soon after he initially pleaded not guilty and showed no emotion, refusing to acknowledge Tia's family. The courtroom was horrified when shown the photographs Hazel had taken of Tia, including the post-mortem image that traumatized her mother, Natalie, forcing her to leave the room in tears after 4 days of distressing evidence. Hazel changed his plea to guilty. Tia's father expressed his devastation, stating that hearing the details of Hazel's actions shattered him. Hazel's sentencing was set for the following day. Public sentiment strongly suggested that many believed he should never be released. Citing his violent and depraved behavior, Stuart Hazel was recognized as an extremely dangerous individual, posing a serious threat to young girls. Despite this, he refused to disclose the full circumstances of Tia's murder or explain why he took her life in such a horrific manner. During sentencing, The judge emphasized the immense betrayal of trust committed against Christine and Natalie. Tia's mother and grandmother, Hazel, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 38 years, meaning he would not be eligible for parole until the age of 75. Mr. Justice Nichols noted that he could not impose a whole life tariff because he could not definitively determine whether Hazel's actions were sexually motivated or premeditated. He stated, "Tia's mother entrusted you with her care, and you violated that trust in the gravest way imaginable. Your guilty plea on day 5 is commendable, but the family has endured for days of a very public trial." The courtroom gasped at the remarks, with Tia's family sobbing openly as Hazel was led away. A man in the public gallery shouted, calling him a beast. The judge explained that while he had no doubt Hazel had sexually assaulted Tia, he could not be certain that this motivated the murder itself. Addressing Hazel directly, the judge said, "Tia was a lively, spirited girl with a future full of love, career opportunities, and family. You stole all of that from her." After the sentencing, Natalie Sharp, Tia's mother, left the court, visibly distraught. When asked if she felt the sentence was sufficient, she responded no, as did Tia's uncle, who said it should have been longer. The aftermath of Tia's death affected countless people. The house where Hazel and Christine had lived, and where Tia was murdered, was demolished in 2013, in July of that year. Tia's father, Stephen Carter, supported a plan to implement internet safeguards, including website alerts for illegal content, by November 2013. Following the murders of Tia Sharp and April Jones, search engines like Google and Bing began blocking search results for terms linked to child abuse. Images. Tia Sharp is remembered not just for the tragic way she left this world, but for her confident, happy, and feisty personality. Her family and friends are determined to honor her memory by celebrating the joy she brought to those around her. Story 5. Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson was born on October 10, 1995, to Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, the youngest of his siblings. Kendrick was the heartbeat of the family, bringing laughter and joy to the household. Described as fun, polite, and well-mannered, Kendrick excelled in sports and academics, particularly science and mathematics. His father recalled how Kendrick had a natural talent for numbers, often keeping track of his allowances in his head. With a promising future ahead and dreams of becoming a professional football player, Kendrick was full of potential. He attended Lowndes High School, a large campus near the Georgia-Florida border, home to around 3,000 students on the day in question. Kendrick, 17, had stayed after school for a basketball game routine he frequently followed for sports and extracurricular activities. However, when he did not return home that night, his mother Jacqueline initially assumed he was simply out with friends. As the 10 p.m. curfew passed, her worry intensified, prompting her to drive to the school in search of him. Unable to find Kendrick, Jacqueline contacted the police at 12:30 a.m. while authorities tried to reassure her that he might be with friends or a girlfriend. Jacqueline sensed that something was seriously wrong. She returned to the school, distributing flyers and asking anyone who might have seen him for information. Determined to locate her son, school counselors and staff reviewed Kendrick's attendance and confirmed that he had not been present in his 4th period weight training class the previous day. Jacqueline, his mother, noted how unusual it was for Kendrick to skip class, and the staff agreed that it was highly out of character. Meanwhile, a group of students in the gym near the wrestling mats noticed something alarming. One student saw feet protruding from a hole in one of the vertically rolled up mats. Initially thinking it was a prank, she quickly realized something was seriously wrong and called her friends for help. More students, along with a teacher, rushed over to assist. The teacher noted a strong, unpleasant odor coming from inside the mat. Once the mat was carefully lowered to the floor, the group discovered blood and vomit around the area at Lowndes High School. Authorities confirmed the tragic discovery. The body of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson had been found inside the vertical rolled-up wrestling mat. His jeans were unzipped, and his front pockets partially pulled out. An LG phone was discovered in his left pocket, and his headphones were wrapped around his hand when the mat was unrolled. Kendrick's body was positioned with one arm stretched above his head and the other down around his waist. His face was severely swollen and unrecognizable, one of the most horrific scenes the officers had ever encountered. Police, who had already been investigating his disappearance, were quickly joined by additional officers. Arriving at 10:35 a.m., as students moved between classes, news of Kendrick's death spread quickly, and the school went into lockdown. Jacqueline and Kenneth Johnson were not allowed to see Kendrick's body. His sister identified him only by the shoes found on the floor. The school remained eerily quiet as students gathered outside, and Kendrick was pronounced dead at the scene later. The time of death was confirmed as before 2 p.m. on January 10th. 2013 authorities initially classified the case as a tragic accident, but many questioned that explanation. The wrestling mat, when rolled up, stood nearly 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, with a central hole measuring 14 inches in diameter. Kendrick, who was 5 feet 10 inches with 19-inch shoulders, would have had to compress his body considerably to fit through the opening. Police argued that it was possible he had crawled inside to retrieve shoes, scrunching his shoulders and extending his arms to fit. However, his parents disputed this, pointing out that his size alone made it unlikely. Investigators pointed to a shoe found near Kendrick's head as evidence for their theory. Students reported that they and Kendrick often left shoes inside the mats to avoid using lockers, sometimes tossing them into the central hole. Police speculated that Kendrick had attempted to retrieve a shoe and tragically became trapped, resulting in suffocation. Yet friends and classmates insisted that it was customary to tilt the mat and retrieve belongings from the bottom, not to climb inside. Additional inconsistencies arose. One shoe from the pair was found outside the mat, while the other remained inside. If Kendrick had been tightly wedged in, how could one shoe have ended up outside the mat, while the other stayed inside? The positioning and circumstances raised more questions than answers. Despite the mat's light weight, it was unclear how Kendrick could have maneuvered the shoe in such a way. The wrestling mat tragedy raised more questions than answers. Witnesses recalled the mat had fallen over previously, and attempts to climb in proved impossible due to its tight, rigid structure. One observer noted, "No matter who you are, your background, wealth, or skin color, everyone deserves justice." Everyone. Crime scene photographs revealed a pair of gray, white, and orange Nike shoes tucked behind Kendrick's knees. A police report mentioned a similar pair of shoes found on the floor near the bleachers, prompting questions. Were these the same, and what role did they play in the incident? Jacqueline Johnson clarified that the black and white Adidas shoes were Kendrick's usual gym shoes, while the shoes found behind his knees were the ones he had been wearing. This left investigators puzzled as to how they ended up in that position. Additional items were found scattered on the gym floor, including a hoodie, a yellow folder, and a textbook, later confirmed to belong to Kendrick. A bloodstain was discovered on a wall about 50 feet away from where Kendrick was found. Testing later confirmed it did not belong to him, and tracing its origin would require over 3,000 tests, involving current and former students and staff. Some of the shoes and the hoodie had reddish stains, but investigators concluded they were not blood and did not collect them as evidence. Independent investigator and former FBI Special Agent Harold Kopus reviewed the crime scene photos for CNN and expressed disbelief that certain items were overlooked. "If you were at this scene, wouldn't you bag and tag it?" he questioned. There's no indication investigators even tried to identify the owner of the shoes or hoodie found near Kendrick's body and looked closely at the cuff. Was that blood? Tests weren't conducted. Lieutenant Stride Jones of the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office noted that the blood on the wall had been present for an extended period and did not appear fresh. It was unlikely a student could have caused such a large stain from a minor scrape, and standard gym cleaning protocols should have removed it long before, despite Georgia law mandating immediate notification of the coroner. Bill Watson was not informed until nearly 6 hours after Kendrick's body was discovered. Watson criticized the lack of cooperation from law enforcement, noting the body had been moved and the scene compromised on January 14th. The preliminary autopsy revealed no significant injuries, only minor abrasions by May 2nd. Authorities officially ruled Kendrick's death an accident due to positional asphyxia inside the mat almost immediately. His family, friends, and civil rights advocates protested outside Lowndes High School. Voicing skepticism about the official findings, they questioned how Kendrick could have become trapped without anyone noticing. Given the steady stream of students and sports teams in the gym that day, others argued the thickness and compact nature of the mats may have made any sounds muffled, if not completely inaudible. Seeking clarity, the Johnson family requested an independent investigation. Reverend Floyd Rose of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, along with a lead investigator for the SCC and former local NAACP chapter president, agreed to conduct an independent review of the circumstances surrounding Kendrick Johnson's death. Reverend Floyd Rose and Lee Touchton began their independent investigation immediately. Determined to uncover any inconsistencies in the official account, they interviewed students, staff, and parents, retracing Kendrick's steps from the moment he left class to the tragic discovery in the gym. Witnesses repeatedly noted that the mats were never used in the way investigators suggested. Students habitually accessed items from the bottom or side, not by climbing inside. This cast doubt on the idea that Kendrick's death was a simple accident. Photos of the gym floor and mats, combined with the bloodstains on the wall and scattered personal belongings, indicated a scene that had been disturbed. Items were in positions that made little sense if Kendrick had acted alone. The investigators also highlighted the timeline. The body was in the gym for hours, during which dozens of students passed by. How could no one hear his cries for help? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice the danger? These unanswered questions fueled suspicion that the official accident ruling may have overlooked critical evidence. The family's frustration grew as they realized the official investigation had gaps. They were particularly concerned about the coroner not being notified in time, the lack of collection of potentially crucial evidence, and the bloodstains that were ignored. Rose and Touchton argued that these oversights undermined confidence in the original conclusion and demanded further forensic examination, including a review of security camera footage and interviews with the custodial staff. Community outrage-mounted protests were organized outside Lowndes High School, with families, civil rights activists, and local leaders demanding accountability. Signs read, "Justice for Kendrick, and every child deserves safety." The local media amplified these concerns, putting pressure on law enforcement in the school district to address the apparent inconsistencies. Many voiced that if Kendrick's death was indeed an accident, the investigative failures meant that no family should ever have to endure such confusion and mistrust. Again, in response, Lowndes County authorities reluctantly agreed to a limited review of the case. However, they maintained their stance that Kendrick's death was accidental. This led to an ongoing clash between official conclusions and independent investigations. Meanwhile, the Johnson family, supported by Reverend Rose and Lee Touchton, continued to call for transparency, demanding access to all evidence, including the blood samples, the gym mat, and the full list of witnesses questioned. Even years later, questions lingered. The mystery of the misplaced shoes, the blood on the wall, and the circumstances that led to Kendrick being trapped in the mat remained unresolved. His family refused to accept the tragedy as a simple accident, insisting that the inconsistencies suggested deeper failings in both school safety protocols and the original investigation. Kendrick Johnson, a young man full of life, dreams, and potential, became a symbol not only of personal loss, but of the larger issues surrounding justice, accountability, and the protection of children in schools. Attorney Benjamin Crump, renowned for representing families in high-profile cases, including Michael Brown, George Floyd, and Trayvon Martin, joined the Johnson family in their fight for justice alongside him. C.B. King Jr. became the family's lead attorney. Crump highlighted the implausibility of the official account, stating that it defied logic, science, and common sense to believe a 17-year-old athlete would climb into a wrestling mat to retrieve a shoe and accidentally suffocate. It's far more likely that someone rolled him up inside that mat. He asserted the Johnsons' legal team scrutinized paramedic reports, which contradicted law enforcement statements. Paramedics noted that Kendrick's body was partially inside the mat, with his head, torso, and arms exposed. They also observed bruising near his jaw, observation missing from the official autopsy. Investigators claimed the discoloration was simply lividity, caused when blood settles after death. Seeking clarity, the family enlisted Dr. William R. Anderson, a forensic pathologist with over 4 decades of experience, to review the autopsy. Dr. Anderson identified immediate red flags for Kendrick to have died from positional asphyxia. There should have been fluid in his lungs. The autopsy reported no such fluid, and the lungs appeared normal in weight and condition. This prompted the Johnsons to request a second autopsy. On June 6th, a Lance County judge granted permission to exhume Kendrick's body, and 8 days later, it was retrieved from Sunset Hills Cemetery. Upon examination, Dr. Anderson discovered that Kendrick's organs, including his brain, heart, lungs, and liver, were missing. Replaced with newspaper, the coroner explained that the organs had decomposed naturally before reaching the funeral home, and it was common practice to replace them with paper or sawdust during embalming. However, Dr. Gregory Schmunk, president of the National Association of Medical Examiners, noted he had never encountered this practice before. Despite this, Dr. Anderson pressed on, performing a full autopsy and searching for overlooked evidence. His report concluded that Kendrick had suffered unexplained blunt force trauma, prompting calls for the case to be reopened as a potential homicide. Dr. Anderson theorized that Kendrick may have been involved in a physical altercation in the gym, during which he was restrained in a manner that caused his death, possibly without intent from the perpetrator. Federal officials reportedly agreed with his assessment, but cited insufficient evidence of civil rights violations to pursue charges. Despite this, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation maintained that Kendrick's death was accidental. We examined all alternatives, they stated. The only scenario consistent with the physical, forensic, and testimonial evidence is an accident. In October, an anonymous donor offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to an arrest or conviction. The Johnsons' attorneys demanded access to the school's surveillance footage, which had allegedly been withheld. The school countered that the family had previously been allowed to review the tapes. Eventually, a judge ordered the release of the 290 hours of footage from 35 cameras, inside and outside the gym. Following this, U.S. Attorney and former politician Michael J. Moore announced a formal review into Kendrick's death. Over 100 people were subpoenaed, and tens of thousands of emails and texts were examined. However, the surveillance videos raised more questions than answers. The school had 2 gyms, and Kendrick's body was found in the old gym. Reconstructing a precise timeline from the footage proved extremely challenging. Yet the videos remained a crucial element in understanding the case. CNN secured early access and enlisted forensic video analyst Grant Fredericks to scrutinize the material. Forensic video analyst Grant Fredericks' review of the school's surveillance footage revealed major gaps and inconsistencies. At least an hour of video was missing from all 4 cameras inside the old gym. These files are not original and should not be relied upon as an accurate record, Frederick explained. The footage had been altered in quality, corrupted, and in some cases, rendered unplayable. Investigators had relied on the school district to decide what to provide to the police, a decision Frederick described as a mistake. 4 gym cameras, which normally recorded from morning until night, all contained significant periods without footage. The first camera recorded until 12:04 p.m., then resumed at 10:09 p.m. The second camera ran until 11:05 a.m., then restarted at 1:15 p.m. The third dropped at 11:05 a.m. and resumed at 1:16 p.m., while the fourth had a similar gap. Frederick noted this missing footage was highly suspicious, and investigators should have questioned it. One issue complicating the analysis was that each surveillance server had its own internal clock, which was not synchronized with the others. This meant timestamps could differ significantly between cameras, creating apparent gaps where none actually existed. Footage from the school's integral servers covered roughly 36 hours of activity in the old gym and surrounding areas, while a Toshiba server captured about 48 hours of the C-Wing and administrative area. Scott Forth, the school district's senior technology technician, exported the footage to an external hard drive under police supervision on the day Kendrick was discovered. Frederick was able to locate Kendrick on the footage, entering the school early in the morning and last seen walking toward the old gym. However, due to the clock discrepancies, the timestamps were unreliable. While some footage suggested he entered the gym at 1:09 p.m., a more accurate estimate placed him there at 1:28 p.m., accounting for the integral server being over 20 minutes behind. The Valdosta Daily Times conducted an independent review and found that, despite timestamp inconsistencies, Kendrick's route to the gym remained consistent. Surveillance shows him walking alone through the C-Wing near the foreign language classrooms at 1:25 p.m., carrying the yellow folder later found near his body. He turned the corner by the B-Wing stairs, past the guidance and administration offices without interaction, and proceeded to the hallway leading to the old gym. The footage from other integral servers, though lacking time, confirmed this movement when cross-referenced with still images from the system. An apparent 10-minute gap between a still image at 12:59 p.m. and another at 1:09 p.m. inside the gym was likely due to the server's clock differences. Frederick also noted that the camera's motion-activated system could create the illusion of missing footage. Cameras recorded when a certain threshold of image blocks changed. Objects closer to the lens triggered recording more reliably, while distant objects sometimes did not, making students appear to vanish in the footage. However, no camera captured what happened inside the old gym itself. The cameras did not cover the area where the wrestling mats were positioned, leaving a critical blind spot as a result. There is no video showing Kendrick entering the mat or providing definitive evidence of the events that led to his death. There is no surveillance footage showing Kendrick leaving the gym, but attendance records confirm he never made it to his fourth period class since the initial export. The servers containing the raw video data have been locked in a vault, only removed at the Johnson family's request to provide select images of Kendrick in the old gym. C.B. King, the family's attorney, noted the lack of synchronized timestamps, saying, "Either the cameras did this on their own, or someone interfered. The positioning of the cameras and the focus issues are far from coincidental." Scott Forth, who exported the footage, explained that, while still images could include timestamps, the videos themselves could not be touched in, and Reverend Floyd Rose, who assisted the family, ultimately found no evidence of a cover-up initially. "I thought there might be foul play," Rose admitted, "but I just don't believe anyone had the power to hide it." January 11, 2014, marked the one-year anniversary of Kendrick's death. Community protests, rallies, and town meetings had been held regularly, with speakers such as Reverend Al Sharpton addressing the crowd. By the end of January, the $10,000 reward for information was rescinded, having expired after 90 days. In February, the Johnson family filed a lawsuit against Harrington Funeral Home, alleging negligence and fraud for failing to disclose that Kendrick's body was missing organs and had been filled with newspaper. The case was later dropped, as investigators found no wrongdoing. However, the missing organs complicated efforts to verify the second autopsy. Dr. Anderson had noted that positional asphyxiation requires fluid in the lungs, a detail impossible to confirm without the organs, which had been removed shortly after. An anonymous email claimed an ex-classmate had killed Kendrick, implicating for others. The sheriff's office dismissed this as rumor and hearsay. Meanwhile, the family pursued a wrongful death lawsuit against the Lowndes County Board of Education, its superintendent, and the school principal. The suit alleged that Kendrick was violently assaulted, suffered extreme physical and emotional trauma, and that the school had failed to protect him. It also cited previous harassment and attacks that the school neglected to address during this period. 7 members of the Johnson family, including Kenneth and Jacqueline, were found guilty of obstruction for blocking access to the Loudoun County Judicial Complex during a 2013 protest. They received a suspended 1-year sentence, contingent on no further incidents. The Johnsons then filed a $100 million federal lawsuit naming 38 defendants, including FBI agent Rick Bell, his sons Brian and Brandon, classmates, and multiple law enforcement and school officials. The suit alleged a conspiracy to cover up Kendrick's murder, claiming the Bell brothers and another student fatally beat Kendrick in the gym and placed him in the wrestling mat. The family stated that prior harassment by the Bell brothers had been reported to the school. Jacqueline recounted an earlier altercation on the school bus where Kendrick had been pushed down by Brian, escalating tensions that afternoon. Federal investigators determined there was sufficient evidence to look into these claims. Federal investigators seized the Bell brothers' phones and computers, as well as electronics belonging to their parents and one of the brothers' girlfriends. Some school surveillance footage reportedly showed one of the brothers with what appeared to be blood on his upper arm, but he explained it was merely a logo. Footage suggested neither brother entered or exited the gym at critical times. Loudoun County Sheriff's deputies maintained that one brother was off campus when Kendrick was last seen alive, and the other was elsewhere in the building. Both brothers insisted they were friends with Kendrick and had no involvement in his death. In a Channel 2 Action News interview, the brothers firmly denied any role. Kendrick was one of my good friends. One said, every word of this will be scrutinized online, but the truth will prevail. We are innocent, despite continued suspicion. Neither brother had any confirmed connection to Kendrick's death. The Johnsons' lawsuit alleged that a group, including the Bell Bros, the sons of an FBI agent, assaulted Kendrick, causing his death. However, both brothers maintained solid alibis. They repeatedly stated they had not seen Kendrick that day and had not obstructed justice or tampered with witnesses. Brandon Bell explained the supposed blood on his shirt was just a logo from his RLX polo. Brian Bell likewise maintained he never saw Kendrick on campus that day. A 2021 documentary, Finding Kendrick Johnson, later revealed a previously redacted FBI report. The known redacted report includes still images of Kendrick and Brian Bell walking together on school grounds the day Kendrick died, which contradicts earlier statements from the brothers and some law enforcement accounts. The report includes descriptions identifying both individuals in the frames, raising questions about prior assertions during depositions. Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson admitted they had no direct evidence implicating the Bell brothers, though they believed the brothers may have been involved. Ebony magazine ran articles discussing the case using pseudonyms for Brian and Brandon, though many readers recognized who was being referenced following this. Brian Bell's Florida State University football scholarship was revoked on signing day. The Bell family later filed a $5 million federal lawsuit against Ebony magazine and the author, claiming slander and libel. No law enforcement official has ever named the Bell brothers as suspects in Kendrick Johnson's death, despite the lawsuits and public outcry. Law enforcement consistently maintained that the Bell brothers were not suspects in Kendrick's death. The Johnson family continued to pursue justice, filing a $100 million wrongful death lawsuit against 38 defendants, including the Loudoun County School District, its superintendent, school officials, and several local law enforcement agencies. The suit alleged that Kendrick had been violently assaulted and that the school had failed to address prior incidents of harassment or attacks against him. The family claimed that law enforcement and school officials conspired to cover up the circumstances of Kendrick's death. They alleged that FBI agent Rick Bell encouraged his sons, Brian and Brandon, along with other students, to attack Kendrick. According to the lawsuit, Jane Doe lured Kendrick into the gymnasium, where he was fatally assaulted and then placed inside the gym mat. The Johnsons maintained that the Bell brothers had a history of harassing Kendrick, which had been previously reported to school authorities. Federal investigators later seized the Bell brothers' electronics, examining phones, computers, and other devices. Surveillance footage was scrutinized, with some frames showing one of the brothers with what appeared to be blood. Though it was later explained as a logo on a shirt, neither brother could be observed entering or exiting the gym at critical times, and deputies confirmed their whereabouts elsewhere during portions of the day. Both Brian and Brandon Bell insisted they had no involvement in Kendrick's death and maintained rock-solid alibis. The denials. The 2021 documentary Finding Kendrick Johnson uncovered a previously heavily redacted FBI report. The now unredacted report contains images showing Brian Bell walking with Kendrick on campus the day of his death. This evidence directly contradicts previous claims made by the brothers and statements from law enforcement. The report's annotations explicitly identify both Kendrick and Brian in the footage, raising questions about the earlier narrative. The Johnsons' civil case claimed negligence, racial discrimination, and deliberate cover-up, but no criminal charges were filed against the Bell brothers or anyone else in connection with Kendrick's death. In response to media coverage, Brian Bell lost a Florida State University football scholarship, prompting the family to file a separate $5 million defamation lawsuit against Ebony magazine and journalist Frederick Rosen. The lawsuit argued that the articles unjustly damaged the Bell family's reputation, though no official investigation ever linked them to Kendrick's death as of today. Kendrick Johnson's death remains officially ruled an accident by authorities, though the case continues to fuel debate and speculation. The combination of conflicting autopsy reports, missing surveillance footage, unanswered questions about the gym mat incident, and the involvement of high-profile legal and media figures ensures that his story remains a source of public scrutiny. The Johnson family continues to seek justice and answers, determined to uncover the truth about the tragic loss of their son. Criminal charges were ever filed against the Bell brothers' attorney Michael J. Moore, who had initially vowed to pursue the case, resigned in 2015, transferring all of his cases to his successor except Kendrick's. The case was then reassigned to the Northern District of Ohio, under a new U.S. attorney, who also soon resigned. Despite these resignations, the Department of Justice continued its independent investigation into Kendrick's death. On May 23, 2015, Lowndes County held its school graduation, the year Kendrick would have graduated alongside his classmates. Protesters gathered outside the school in support of Kendrick and his family, who revealed that the school had refused to honor Kendrick's memory during the ceremony in March 2016. The Johnson family withdrew their $100 million wrongful death lawsuit subsequently. They were ordered to pay up to $850,000 in attorney's fees and faced over $1 million in defamation claims. Judge Richard Porter ruled their claims to be frivolous, groundless, or vexatious. The family appealed, but the appeal was dismissed later that year. Supporter Bobby Worthy filed a complaint with the FBI and the Judicial Qualifications Commission, alleging that Judge Porter had fallen asleep multiple times during trial and showed favoritism toward the defense attorneys. In June 2016, Benjamin Crump, who had worked closely with the family, stepped down, citing an inability to continue legal representation alongside their lead attorney, C.B. King Jr. The Department of Justice eventually concluded that the federal investigation found insufficient evidence to support criminal charges. According to the 2021 documentary Finding Kendrick Johnson, Kenneth Johnson revealed that the DOJ stated the shoe found under Kendrick's head had been planted. The Johnson family continued pursuing justice through additional lawsuits. A 41-defendant lawsuit was filed in 2017, but dismissed without prejudice, followed by a third lawsuit in the Superior Court of Bibb County targeting Lowndes County officials and former classmates in January 2018. The family sought to have Kendrick's body exhumed for a third autopsy, again performed by Dr. William Anderson. Kenneth Johnson stated that, although the family wished they did not have to go through it, they were determined to find the truth 10 months later. The third autopsy confirmed non-accidental blunt force trauma to Kendrick's right neck and thorax. Dr. Anderson shared his findings with two other pathologists, who confirmed the results the Johnsons believed. The evidence now strongly pointed to homicide, and felt it was crucial to present it to a jury, Kenneth stated. My family won't be satisfied until someone is behind bars for what happened. Common sense tells us this wasn't an accident. In April 2019, Sheriff Ashley Polk wrote to federal prosecutors, requesting any unreleased files from the federal investigation. The DOJ allowed him access to what Polk described as 17 filing cabinets full of records, computer towers, and hard drives. Information he considered vital for a thorough review. It's going to be a lot of work, but the people and the family deserve it, he said. In June 2020, an online petition calling for the case to be reopened gained widespread attention. The Johnson County Sheriff's Office subsequently reopened the investigation into Kendrick Johnson's death, which had originally been ruled an accident in 2013 after his body was found inside a rolled-up Jim Mott. Sheriff Ashley Polk's office has recently received boxes of documents from the federal government for review, and investigators will also be re-interviewing individuals connected to the case. Sheriff Polk emphasized that, while he is not accusing anyone of wrongdoing, he intends to follow the evidence wherever it leads and personally oversee the investigation. He expects this review to take at least 6 months. Kendrick Johnson's case was officially reopened in March 2021. Sheriff Polk clarified that he was not claiming any fault in the original investigation or disputing the initial conclusion that Kendrick's death was accidental. He stated, "I've never told anyone what I believe about this case. Whether it was an accident or murder, I would never say that until I could review all the evidence. If it was an accident, it's a very unusual way for something to happen a week after reopening the case." Potential new evidence emerged. A 25-second audio recording, purchased by the Johnson family for $1,000, appeared to contain an alleged confession. The voice on the tape says, "They're going to catch me anyways. I should have never done this. I was young and stupid. Kendrick didn't deserve this," ending with a tearful admission, according to the family. The recording had been secretly made by a relative of the speaker, who then sold it to them. Sheriff Polk confirmed that authorities are working to verify the clip and may involve the GBI, noting that the voice could belong to someone already questioned in the case. However, 2 months later, it was revealed that the recording was a cruel hoax. "This is a terrible hoax. This woman has already lost her child, and it's unbelievable that someone would exploit that for money," Sheriff Polk said. Despite the setback, Kendrick's case remains officially open and under active investigation, Sheriff Polk stated. "We're starting fresh, like a investigation. I want to clear up all the rumors and accusations. I just want the truth, nothing more, nothing less." As the rain falls gently and the night deepens, thank you for joining us at Crime Whisper. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying vigilant. Even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night, let the rain carry you to a peaceful rest until we meet again. Stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.